Because Justin can claim, we gave her everything. What else can we still do?
Yeah.
So is odd. But so final question, because they asked, could you go to jail? And you're like, it's unlikely. Is it more likely that Stephanie Jones could go to jail? And if Blake was more involved and actually pushed that stuff to happen, could there be any sort of criminal?
The courtroom twist no one saw coming may have just cracked Blake Lively's legal armor wide open. In what looked like a simple venue-based ruling, the judge officially dismissed Jed Wallace from Lively's lawsuit. On paper, it's just a relocation. But dig deeper, and this technicality carries the weight of a warning shot. Wallace, accused of orchestrating online smear campaigns on Lively's behalf, was let go, not because of innocence or exoneration, but because the alleged misconduct happened in Texas, not New York. That's it. Still, the consequences could be severe. Lively's team is allowed to refile the complaint elsewhere, but they're boxed in, limited only to the same claims. No new evidence, no extra allegations, which means whatever she already had better be enough.
They were the ones who sort of were accused of doing the dirty deeds of the retaliation campaign, the untraceable acts across Reddit and so on. He denies this. He says none of that happened. We'll go through what he says in a second. But Blake was accusing him of being hired by Tag PR, etc., to do a...
If this case was a chessboard, the judge just took one of Lively's key pieces off the table and told her she can try again, but only with the same flawed strategy. This isn't just a hiccup in her legal plans, it's a signal, and the message is clear. The clock is ticking, and the courtroom won't keep giving her second chances. But if Wallace walks, who becomes the new centerpiece of this legal drama? On the surface, Blake Lively still has a chance to go after Jed Wallace, just in a different courtroom, but the judge didn't hand her a blank slate. He handed her a legal leash. Any new filing must stick to the exact same claims already brought against Wallace. No fresh allegations, no added context, no surprises. And that restriction changes everything. If Lively's case was built like a house of cards, this ruling just made it illegal to touch the deck again. What's more concerning? The judge pointed out that all relevant evidence tied to Wallace had already been submitted. That revelation raises a brutal question. What's left?
Related to these communications, where I think that they're probably going to come after them for abusive process or some other remedy, like making those communications inadmissible at trial or something to that effect. Worst case scenario for them, for the Lively parties, is going to be an abusive process cause of action, an independent cause of action. But that's what Friedman is going to have to decide.
Lively's legal team can try to repackage the same story in a new zip code, but without any new material, it risks looking repetitive, or worse, desperate. It's one thing to have your claims tossed out on a technicality. It's another to have the court quietly acknowledge that you've already fired your best shot. And if that's true, what exactly does her team hope to uncover in a refiled complaint? Because when your evidence is spent and your strategy boxed in, the legal battlefield doesn't just shrink, it turns against you. As Blake Lively navigates legal loopholes with seemingly endless do-overs, Justin Baldoni is stuck on the outside looking in. The contrast couldn't be sharper. While Lively's team is granted time, leniency, and even the ability to rework dismissed claims, Baldoni's requests for basic discovery have hit a wall. He's been pushing for more time to respond, more access to documents, more chances to defend himself. And yet, each motion feels like it's stamped with a quiet but firm denied. Observers are starting to notice, and they're not impressed. Why is one side allowed to stretch the rules while the other can't even get a fair shot at rebuttal?
If he just lets it go and he doesn't penalize the Lively parties at all for anything that's gone down, it's going to set a wild precedent in the Second Circuit about how you can maneuver in the court system to obtain evidence in these various shady ways. Oh yeah, just file a lawsuit. You don't have to name anybody. You don't have to notify anybody, and then you'll get whatever.
The perception of favoritism is building. And it's not just sour grapes from Baldoni's corner. Even legal analysts are starting to ask, is the system showing signs of bias? One critic summed it up best. How can Justin be expected to defend himself when the other side keeps getting second chances and he can't even get his first? If this truly is a battle of fairness, then the scales are starting to look tipped, and the court's next move could either restore balance or confirm everyone's worst suspicion.
It could have never snowballed into what it did without organic, genuine people reacting to Blake's real statements, her real actions. So this idea that they orchestrated it, the idea that Jed Wallace or Melissa Nathan or any of them forced me to do what I'm doing, or countless others over the summer to report on her ridiculous marketing choices, her bad attitude and junkets, her avoidance of DV, where it's like, girl, this is what the movie's about. I understand maybe you're trying to make it seem a little bit more Barbie for the sake of making it successful, but you got to know the tone and you got to know your time and place, and she just didn't throughout that whole marketing campaign. And beyond that, she was marketing her own companies. How does that help the film? It only helps her. So all of that was tone deaf. It was wrong.
Blake Lively's legal team claims they uncovered the smoking gun. Private text messages from a woman named Stephanie Jones. Messages that supposedly strengthened their case. But how they got them? That's where the whole thing starts to unravel. There are now serious whispers that these texts weren't obtained through standard legal channels. Some allege they came through a fake subpoena. Others say it was a shell corporation doing the dirty work behind closed doors. Either way, it's triggered one question no one can ignore. Were these messages stolen? Lively's case leans heavily on this evidence. Without it, the foundation crumbles. And if it turns out her team crossed the line to get it, the fallout could be massive. Not just for the case itself, but for her public image, because in the court of opinion, dirty tactics leave permanent stains.
But for me personally, the definition of retaliation and smear campaign would be putting stuff that's not true, would be trying to, create negative narratives that aren't realistic. And I didn't see any of that.
The texts were described as crucial by insiders, but if they were obtained illegally, not only could they be thrown out, but her entire legal strategy could implode under the weight of its own ambition. One source asked the question everyone's thinking: was this evidence so important they were willing to break the rules to get it? The deeper this case goes, the murkier it gets. If Blake Lively's team really did use underhanded tactics to obtain those texts, the consequences could go beyond losing evidence. They could trigger legal backlash of their own. Some court watchers are floating the idea of an abusive process claim, meaning her team might have weaponized the system to gain an edge. That could mean motions to disqualify the evidence, sanctions, or even separate lawsuits. In short, the risks are piling up. And here's the kicker: the texts themselves, no matter how damning or dramatic, may never be shown to a jury if the way they were obtained doesn't hold up. This isn't just a bad look, it could be catastrophic. Legal experts are already warning about the precedent this might set.
Now, Lyman hasn't been very Team Justin, it seems. He's been giving Blake a lot of, where the deposition's going to happen. All this stuff keeps falling in. Are you noticing that? Even now as content creators, there's one, it just doesn't seem like he's being very friendly to anybody other than accommodating Blake. Are you seeing that too, or do you?
If courts allow this kind of thing, then anyone can file a case, grab confidential data, and walk away without consequences, one analyst warned. The spotlight is now squarely on how those messages were acquired and who knew what. Because if it turns out someone close to Lively greenlit the plan, this doesn't just become an evidentiary issue, it becomes a credibility crisis. And for someone who's built a brand on grace and integrity, that's the real threat. Enter Jed Wallace, the man at the center of Blake Lively's most chaotic subplot. According to court documents and public speculation, Wallace wasn't just some consultant with a clipboard. He's been painted as the architect of a quiet digital war, allegedly orchestrating a behind-the-scenes campaign to discredit Justin Baldoni on forums like Reddit. The allegations claim he manipulated public sentiment, planting narratives and ghost posts to make it look like the internet turned on Baldoni naturally. But Wallace says that's nonsense. He insists he was hired only to analyze public opinion, not influence it. He didn't create fake accounts, didn't start any rumors. He just watched the media landscape and gave feedback. That's his version anyway. But the timing of the backlash against Baldoni raises eyebrows. Why did everything flare up just after Wallace's involvement began? Coincidence or coordination? Even media outlets are split. Some believe Wallace merely lit a match, and others fanned the flames. Others think he handed out the matches himself. Either way, his role is under intense scrutiny, and it's pulling the spotlight back to the woman who allegedly hired him. Because if this was a PR campaign disguised as legal prep, what else has Blake Lively's team been quietly steering from the shadows?
Well, I think that he needs to get the communications first. I don't know if he's received them yet or not. I know they've been compelled. Once he have those...
Right, that was a win for Team Judge, right? The judge did reveal, yes, you must give this information over.
Yes, there's no argument that you could withhold him. And so, yes, he's got that information. The next step is to figure out what specific communications were obtained via that subpoena. Step 2 is run an analysis of whether or not any of those were illegally obtained. How deep into her personal communications did they go? And how many hoops did they have to jump through to get to her personal stuff?
As the legal firestorm intensifies, public opinion is shifting, and fast. Once seen as a poised, untouchable figure in Hollywood, Blake Lively is now facing a backlash that feels anything but scripted. Legal commentators, YouTubers, and even former fans are starting to push back, questioning whether Lively's actions are rooted in justice or something far more self-serving. Popcorn Planet didn't mince words, calling parts of her legal strategy shady and accusing her of using the court system as a tool to silence critics. Others joined in, labeling her team's subpoenas against content creators as not just aggressive, but outright bullying. The optics are terrible. In a time when celebrities are under more scrutiny than ever, Lively's campaign is beginning to feel like a cautionary tale in how not to handle controversy. Legal minds like Emily Baker have warned that this scorched earth approach could backfire, turning a defamation suit into a reputational landslide. The more her team tries to control the narrative, the more it seems to unravel. And while Baldoni faces his own share of criticism, Lively's high-profile maneuvers are drawing the most heat. The question now isn't whether she's winning in court, but whether she's already lost in the public eye.
Anthony Jones to get this stuff, then she would be the one directly implicated, including whoever were her agents potentially that knew they were doing criminal stuff. How do they tie that into Lively, that they were acting under Lively's direction? That would implicate Lively, but I don't see that connection yet. All I know is the theory is they shared those communications with Lively either at her direction or voluntarily, and I don't know which is which. It's not impossible that she's going to go to jail, but if there is a fact pattern that suggests that Lively ordered her to do these illegal theft of personal messages on Jones or Abel's phone, then potentially she could face criminal scrutiny through agency theory, I guess, potentially.
Blake Lively's once polished image is beginning to fray, and not just from the legal drama. Critics have started connecting the dots between her courtroom tactics and her public behavior. During what should have been a major film campaign, Lively was noticeably absent from major interviews, skipped TV appearances, and instead leaned into promoting her personal brands. While some chalked it up to strategy, others saw it as tone-deaf self-promotion at the worst possible time. Why market your soda company during a movie about television? One commentator asked. It felt like she was cashing in, not showing up. That sentiment is gaining traction. And it's not just outsiders raising eyebrows. Creators once sympathetic to her cause are now flipping, pointing out that Lively seems more focused on controlling perception than facing the facts. Meanwhile, Baldoni's quiet approach is earning him unexpected sympathy. With actors like James Brolin stepping in to publicly back him, the contrast between the two couldn't be starker. While Lively's moves come off as calculated and defensive, Baldoni's restraint is being seen as maturity. The court might still be undecided, but the public, they're starting to make up their minds, and Lively's once golden reputation may be slipping past the point of no return.
Has Friedman, I guess that's where I'm lost. Has Friedman taken that next step? Where are we currently in the case, and what needs to happen for this to be even more carefully looked at?
If Blake Lively's team is playing chess, Justin Baldoni's stuck in a game where the rules keep changing and not in his favor. While Lively has been allowed to refile claims and tweak her strategy, Baldoni has reportedly struggled just to access the materials he needs to defend himself. Multiple requests for discovery, those crucial documents and communications exchanged before trial, have hit roadblocks, while Lively's team sails ahead with a courtroom game plan that feels oddly unrestricted. Even commentators are beginning to call it out, wondering why one side gets flexibility and the other faces limitations at every turn. How can Justin refute the accusations when he can't even see what's being used against him? One legal analyst asked. The imbalance is glaring, and it's starting to raise the kind of questions that don't go away quietly. Is this just a case of poor timing and legal nuance, or is something deeper happening behind the scenes? As the judge continues to grant Lively's motions and delay decisions that could help Baldoni, even neutral observers are starting to take sides. Because in a case this public, perception is power. And right now, the courtroom doesn't just look divided, it looks rigged.
And the other overarching issue that Judge Lyman is inevitably going to have to figure out is he understands the relevance of why they're asking for what they're asking for. He compelled these communications from Van Zandt because he says that it's relevant to whether or not you fraudulently obtained this evidence, point blank, and you can't argue otherwise. And then he made some other rulings, but he said that, look, they've made an argument that you fraudulently concealed something and tried to launder evidence and use it for gain in this lawsuit, and so therefore it's relevant. We're compelling it. Now, what the Baldoni parties are essentially saying, or the Wayfarer parties are now saying, or what they're tipping us off on, is they are preparing a further or future motion.
The courtroom drama might be unfolding under legal rules, but behind the scenes, the stakes are bigger than motions and filings. They're about trust, credibility, and potential consequences no one wants to say out loud. Rumors are swirling that if Blake Lively's team truly directed or approved the questionable acquisition of private messages, this could go beyond a civil case. Legal experts have cautiously mentioned the possibility of criminal exposure, not just for the people who obtained the data, but for anyone who ordered it. So far, there's no direct evidence tying Lively to the act, but that hasn't stopped the speculation. If it turns out someone acted under her direction, or even shared the material with her knowingly, the fallout could be unprecedented.
Baldoni parties are essentially saying, or the Wayfarer parties are now saying, or what they're tipping us off on, is they are preparing a further or future motion related to these communications, where I think that they're probably going to come after them for abusive process or some other remedy, like making those communications inadmissible at trial or something to that effect. Worst case scenario for them, for the Lively parties.
Has Friedman, I guess that's where I'm lost. Has Friedman taken that next step? Where are we currently in the case, and what needs to happen for this to be even more carefully looked at?
But even without criminal charges, the damage is already done. Her credibility has taken a hit, her public image is bleeding, and the court of opinion is louder than ever. Baldoni, once painted as the aggressor, now seems like the one fighting uphill for a fair shot. And with depositions looming, subpoenas flying, and the press watching every move, one question remains: will this lawsuit end in vindication, or in a legacy permanently stained?